Do football fans in these new stadiums feel as if they have a home? Because that's what football really is. What is a DNA for a club? And it gets talked about a lot. So let's start with it, right? What is the DNA of a football club? Let's just take team I support, Liverpool, for example. What would I say is the DNA of Liverpool? Well, in more recent years, it's probably very high energy, heavy metal, Jurgen Klopp type football, right? But is that my version of Liverpool way because Liverpool were successful and they won the Premier League and they won the Champions League and won the Club World Cup and all those things? So is the reason I think that that's kind of my way that I want Liverpool to play because we were successful? What is the Manchester United way? Well, everyone keeps saying it's Sir Alex Ferguson, how he played. How did Sir Alex Ferguson play? Well, he had the kind of wingers with like Giggs and Beckham, and you had your Cantonas, and then your Keanes in the middle of the park, and your Gary Nevilles in the class of '92. But they won. They dominated. So is that really the Man United type of way? And I think a really interesting point that I heard on this podcast, on the Anfield Wrap, was how the different types of managers were almost like these traits that Fergie had that they've tried to go for. So they talked about, well, was it the Scottishness, David Moyes? No. Was it then the kind of head teacher, head master, kind of dictator rulership style in Louis van Gaal? No. Was it then the kind of antagonist, like us against the world, not letting the media in, that kind of bite that he had to him in Jose Mourinho? No. Was it then a guy that had won a Champions League final in 1999 and scored that winning goal in Ole Gunnar Solskjaer? No. Right? And then they obviously have then gone on to like Ruben Amorim and stuff. But it was interesting how they kind of went through about how like all of those guys, maybe United have tried to like pick these traits from Fergie and like what really was it about him that made us to be successful? And for me, it's just who he is. You don't recreate that. It's all of those things combined into one, along with, you know, a very clever staff and team around him. I'm sure he would admit that too. But that was interesting. You then take Chelsea. Like, what's Chelsea's DNA? For me, in my head, and my time, my whole era of watching football, it's Jose Mourinho in Chelsea. But if you look at Chelsea's history before that, that wasn't what Chelsea are. And even after it now, it's not really what Chelsea are. Kind of Mourinho and Conte and Ancelotti came in there a little bit. But again, winners, winning things, winning Champions Leagues, winning league titles. I know backed by a lot of money from Abramovich at the start, but again, it's through winning. You know, we can go on and on and on. You want to do West Ham, what's the West Ham way? And people will hark back to all of those times and the way that they played football. But again, West Ham were successful in that time. And like a club's DNA conversation kind of comes up whenever they're not doing well. Like if you look at Spurs, like what is Spurs' DNA? All right, attractive players, good kind of players that get you off your seat. But there's no substance to that. Like you can go out and buy a winger that can come in and do 100 different stepovers and look great, but there's no substance to that. And I think that's where kind of Spurs are struggling, is because you know they don't typically win anything, right? Obviously Ange gets the Europa League trophy and everything, but they don't typically win anything. So it's just a really, really interesting discussion on that. So first of all, let me know what you guys kind of think about that, about like a club's DNA. Like, what is it? What is it? And really, is it just based off a successful time period? Is that really all it is? The second point that they got into, which was very interesting, was football kind of fans now and football and how it's run. And even as a manager, do you get time to kind of create that style, that DNA? And it's obviously a talking point all the time. But about how nowadays, in particular, I'm using the Premier League as an example here, it does really feel like one game and sometimes teams are getting booed off. And I think Everton got booed off at the weekend last time. I mean, they're sitting 8th in the Premier League, are they not? Give or take a roundabout there. I mean, for Everton, who have been down there at the bottom for a long time, you know, just getting by a relegation, but they're booing, like, what are you kind of meant to do there? And I think that the talk about how much season tickets are costing, or tickets to games are now costing, you know, £100+ and whatever it is. And I think when we spend that much money in our lives, whatever it is, it's a transaction of value. Like, I really want that value replaced for me. So if I go to one game and it costs me £120 for a ticket, and I might, you know, if I'm a dad, I might take my son with me, so that's £240 plus the kind of whole trip that I embark on that to go to maybe a Premier League game, say it's a Liverpool game, I want value back from that in the 90 minutes of the game, or 100 plus minutes nowadays of the game. And I think what football really is, and what football definitely used to be, and I know the world is sped up now with social media and everything, but football was really judged over the course of a season for the most part. And if you're a season ticket holder, you probably judge the value of your season ticket come the end of the season. That was a shit season. Christ, was that worth the £500 I spent on the season ticket or whatever? Or it was an amazing season. That was well worth it. And however context that is for any different type of club. And I do agree with that. I think nowadays, just with the cost, and obviously people that typically would like to go to football games, it's classed as a working class sport. You know, that's where it kind of came from. That's its roots. And I think it's slowly being dragged away, and the roots of us, of working class people, are holding on to that. But I think that you're paying that money and you're expecting that transaction. And if you don't get what you want in those 90 minutes or whatever, you feel entitled to, and of course you are entitled to boo and say what you think. But it was a really interesting take, and just the impatience. And I think that on top of that, I think fans getting a little bit bored in the Prem. I think fans watching their teams, and there's so much at stake with regards to relegation if you go down with the money, making Europa League or Champions League, or not making it with the money. You know, Ange even talked about that, fear in football. In the Stick to Football interview, he talked about that. The fear of even maybe making it into Europe, but then knowing that you don't have the squad to be able to handle Europe, and what that could do for your league form to then slip down and maybe be in the relegation battles. There's a lot of fear surrounding the football clubs due to the money. The money's made it, get to the heights that we've seen it at. It's made the kits look great. The players are athletes. The pitches are immaculate. And even some of the newer stadiums. And to get into that point, again, which they talked about on the Anfield Rap podcast, which was a really great, excellent point. And they used, kind of Spurs really is the main example of their new stadium, but also kind of Arsenal at the Emirates. And I was so glad, by the way, when FSG just decided to extend Anfield for this exact reason of, do football fans in these new stadiums feel as if they have a home? Because that's what football really is. It's finishing your work. It's going to the pub with your mates to watch it on the telly and then potentially go to the ground. And wherever it is, it's your home. My Uncle Glyn always says about Hearts, Tynecastle was his mecca at the weekend, when he was growing up throughout his teens and 20s and early 30s. It was where he went every weekend religiously when they were at home. And you went to that stadium and that ground and all those memories. And I'm an energy believer, guys. I think that plays a part in life and things, the energy that comes out of it. And I think these new stadiums are all fantastic and they look amazing, and even West Ham's one, you can throw that into the mix. But they don't have the essence to them. They don't have the essence of, what Highbury has, or what Anfield has, or what Old Trafford has. And if I'm Man United, I would rather Old Trafford be redone up and you expand it and you extend it and you make it more modern, but you don't lose the feel of the home of the place. And that's hugely, hugely important for football. And I've felt and seen that we've started to move away from that. The Premier League certainly is called the tourist league and stuff. And I get as to why, with all these people that go now with the money that it costs and how global it is, and people come in. It's not your miners down the pits coming to watch a game to kind of escape from that life anymore. Of course, it's not. World moves on, life moves on. Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a really good point about the stadiums and just feeling at home and these multi-purpose stadiums. And I lived in America for 8 years, and this is not a bash on America or American sports or anything, but just knowing football and what the essence was. The sports are a bit gimmicky. There's a lot more going on when you're at a American football game or a basketball game or an ice hockey game. There's always something going on when the players, take a break or a timeout, cheerleaders come on the pitch. There's things that go on. The essence of why you're there is not necessarily due to the game, if that makes sense. And I know there's a lot of people that would disagree with me and say, no, I'm there for the game. And I'm not saying that's everybody, but it's kind of designed around television and the money and the breaks and the ad breaks and all of those things. And I just think with these new stadiums, you get that feel of a bit of a soulless feel to it. And it's a big talk about football losing its soul and everything. Life moves on. The world goes on. But let me know what your guys' thoughts are in the comments. I thought it was a really interesting podcast. I really, really enjoyed it from Neil Atkinson. And I apologise, I can't even remember who he had on as the guest. I'll have it in the description. for you guys on there, but it was a really, really good discussion and something I kind of wanted on to come on and kind of just repeat and express my own kind of thoughts and feelings on it. So let me know in the comments what you guys think. As always, like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy the videos. And until the next one, have a good one, all right? Peace.